A thin mist clung to the pine-covered hills of northern Oregon, the kind that turns sound into whispers and light into memory. Down the winding road from Millbrook Town, a dusty Ford pickup rumbled slowly toward a lonely hill where a mansion, or what once had been one, leaned against time. Elias Turner gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles pale. At 58, he looked older than his years, though his frame was still strong, the posture of a man who had learned to carry weight silently. His square jaw was rough with a 2-day beard, streaked gray like ashes from old fires. The faint scar near his temple caught the pale morning light, a remnant from the rescue mission that had ended a brotherhood and begun his solitude. Beside him, on the worn leather seat, lay Duke, a German shepherd of 7 years, with a black saddle coat and amber eyes that seemed to hold more memory than most men. His right ear had a small notch, and a white scar traced down his shoulder where shrapnel had once burned through fur and flesh. Duke was calm now, his head resting on his paws, yet every sharp sound made him twitch, a soldier's reflex never forgotten. He and Elias shared the same silence, the kind forged in smoke and sirens. The truck stopped before the gate, which leaned half open as though exhausted from decades of keeping out the wind. Beyond it stood the house, 2 stories, Victorian style, but the years had peeled away the grace. The paint had withered into gray streaks, windows gaped like hollow eyes. Moss climbed the walls as if nature itself tried to cover the scars. Elias stared for a long while before stepping out. The wind carried the smell of wet pine and rust. He could taste the past in it. He pulled a folded letter from his jacket, the one that had brought him here, the estate of Thomas Wainwright, a distant cousin twice removed, now legally his. Condemned structure, the county notice had said in red ink. 90 days until demolition. Elias sighed. He hadn't spoken to Thomas in 30 years, barely remembered the man beyond the vague stories his mother told. Eccentric, solitary, the kind who believed houses had souls. Duke jumped from the truck, sniffing the air, tail wagging tentatively. His nails clicked on the old cobblestone path, echoing through the emptiness. Elias followed, every step sinking slightly in damp moss. He reached the porch, boards soft underfoot, and read the official sticker pinned to the door. Unsafe for entry. Authorized personnel only. A government stamp of death. Authorized personnel, Elias muttered, fishing out the key. Guess that's me now. Inside, the smell of dust and forgotten winters hit him like a wave. Light pushed through cracked shutters, catching the particles floating like slow snow. Furniture sat beneath white sheets, and an upright piano in the corner had collapsed inward like a body folding under grief. Elias took off his cap, feeling a strange reverence. He had seen houses like this, burned, flooded, abandoned, but this one felt different. It wasn't destroyed by disaster, only by time and neglect. He walked through the hall, Duke padding behind, ears rotating toward every creak. In the dining room, he found a framed photograph fallen face down. He turned it over. A man in his 60s, lean, high-browed, wearing a waistcoat, and a woman whose smile barely touched her eyes. "So that's you, Thomas," Elias whispered. "Guess you outlived your ghosts." He ran his hand across the table. The dust marked his fingers like ash, and the sensation tugged at a memory. A burning building, a mother screaming, a dog barking orders he couldn't follow fast enough. He blinked hard, pushing it away. He was done with rescues, done with failure. Footsteps approached from behind. Duke barked sharply, tail stiff. Elias turned, but no one was there. Only the slow drip of water from a leak in the ceiling. He laughed softly, trying to mask the unease. Easy, boy. Just the house settling in. But even as he said it, a chill moved through him. The kind that doesn't come from cold, but from being watched. From the doorway appeared a figure. A woman in her late 40s, bundled in a tan raincoat, carrying a clipboard. Her hair, cut short and practical, was streaked with copper strands that caught the weak light. She had sharp cheekbones, eyes that missed nothing, and a voice brisk with purpose. "Mr. Turner?" Elias straightened. "That's me, and you are?" "Marjorie Lane, County Inspector." She extended her hand. "Here to confirm the structural report before the demolition date." Her handshake was firm, her expression somewhere between sympathy and bureaucracy. She scanned the interior with a practiced eye, tapping notes. "This place has been empty 25 years. Floors are rotting. Foundations shifting. Would cost a fortune to make livable again." Elias gave a dry chuckle. "Story of my life." Marjorie looked at him for a moment, something softening in her expression. "I heard you're the one who saved those hikers in Crater Ridge back in '09. You've seen worse than this." Elias hesitated. "Yeah, I've seen what happens when things collapse." She nodded as if she understood more than he said. Duke sniffed at her boots, tail flicking. She bent to pat him. "Handsome boy. He's a vet too, isn't he?" Elias smiled faintly. "More decorated than I am." Marjorie finished her notes and closed the folder. "If you're thinking of restoring it, you've got 90 days to convince the board. After that, it's bulldozers." She glanced once more around the room. "Some houses can be saved, Mr. Turner. Others just need to be let go." When she left, the silence returned heavier than before. Elias walked upstairs, Duke following close. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. The banister groaned. In the master bedroom, the floor sagged near the window. From here, he could see the whole town below. Roofs like little islands in a sea of fog. For a moment, he imagined the house alive again, lamps glowing, laughter echoing down the hall. Then Duke growled, low and uncertain. "What is it?" Elias crouched beside him, the dog's nose pressed to the floorboard, paw scraping at something beneath. Elias frowned, pried up a loose plank, and found nothing but darkness. Then, faintly, the smell of cedar oil. He reached in and touched the edge of a small metal box, cold and heavy. Pulling it out, he brushed away the dust. The lid was engraved with a single word: "Begin." His heart gave a slow, solid thud. "Well, that's specific." He tried to open it, but the latch wouldn't move. Duke tilted his head, eyes bright with curiosity. Elias stood, holding the box against his chest. The house creaked again, a deep groan from somewhere beneath, as if answering. He looked around. Empty rooms, falling light, the weight of years pressing in. And yet, for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him. Not fear, not grief, but a sense of being called. Duke barked once, sharp and commanding, staring toward the hall as though someone had just stepped in. Elias turned, pulse quickening. Hello? No answer. Only the faint sound of piano keys, 3 notes, played from nowhere, and then silence. Morning crept through the cracked shutters in muted gold, touching the dust that hung suspended like ghosts that refused to leave. Elias Turner sat at the edge of a broken armchair, the small metal box still in his hands. The word begin caught the light like a challenge. Duke lay beside him, his fur rising slightly as though he too felt the quiet pulse under the floorboards. Elias hadn't slept. Those 3 piano notes still haunted him. Clear, deliberate, almost human. He told himself it was the wind, a loose wire, a trick of the house breathing. But something inside him knew better. By mid-morning, he began clearing the living room. Every motion was deliberate, almost ritualistic. Years of being a rescuer had trained him to search systematically, to look where others didn't. He stacked broken picture frames, rolled up a moldy carpet, pried loose floorboards. Duke followed his every move, occasionally sniffing at shadows. When Elias reached the far wall, the one opposite the collapsed piano, Duke suddenly froze. His ears pricked, his body stiffened, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. Elias turned, dust clinging to his sweat-soaked shirt. "What is it, boy?" Duke barked once, sharp and short, pawing at the damp section of the wall where the plaster had bubbled. Elias approached, laid a hand against it. The wood sounded hollow. He frowned, fetched a hammer from his tool bag, and tapped along the grain. Thud, 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 then a hollow echo. Not empty, but close, like a secret holding its breath. He worked carefully, prying off a plank. Beneath the rot, a small recess appeared, sealed with a tin cover. Duke whined softly, pacing in small circles as if anticipating something. Elias reached in, heart pounding, and pulled out a small box wrapped in oilcloth. The fabric crumbled under his fingers. Inside lay a hand-drawn map. Its ink faded but still legible, the lines curved in loops and intersecting symbols. Next to it, a folded letter yellowed with age. He opened it gingerly. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned. "To whomever finds this, know that my work was never finished. The house keeps its promise only to those who listen. Complete what I began, or its silence will consume you too. No signature, no date." Elias leaned back against the wall, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. "Well," he muttered, "that's comforting." He glanced at Duke, who tilted his head as though asking what came next. For the first time in years, Elias felt something close to curiosity, the kind that once got him through collapsed tunnels and burning rafters. There was a mission again, though he couldn't yet name it. By noon, the quiet outside was broken by the rumble of a truck climbing the hill. A silver pickup stopped at the gate. From it stepped Wyatt Cole, a man built like he was carved from the same stone that lined the hills. Tall, broad-shouldered, with slicked back black hair and a beard trimmed to perfection. His face bore the smug ease of someone used to having the last word. He wore a crisp plaid shirt, jeans too clean for real work, and a pair of polished boots that gleamed even in the mud. Wyatt waved as he approached, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if it isn't the famous Elias Turner. Heard the old Wainwright place found a new owner." Elias set the box aside, wary. Word travels fast in small towns. That it does. Wyatt stepped closer, glancing around the porch, with a businessman's detachment. Shame about the condition, though. I own coal construction. We handle demolitions for the county. Figured I'd offer you a deal before the board moves forward. Elias crossed his arms. What kind of deal? Wyatt's smile widened. 10 grand. Cash. I'll take the property off your hands. You won't have to worry about permits or the headache of fixing this pile of wood. Elias almost laughed. 10,000? You're generous. Wyatt's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation breaking through the charm. You'll get nothing once it's condemned. Trust me, this hill's going commercial soon. Storage units, maybe condos. The old days are gone. Elias studied him. The crisp shirt, the manicured nails, the restless confidence of a man who'd never pulled a dying body from a wreck. I'm not interested in tearing down history for profit, he said quietly. Wyatt smirked. History doesn't pay taxes. He shrugged, backing away. Think it over, Turner. You've got 90 days before the bulldozers. After that, I won't be offering 10 grand. When the truck left, Duke barked at the cloud of dust it kicked up, as if to chase away something foul. Elias patted his head. You and me both, pal. He spent the rest of the afternoon examining the map. The lines traced the outline of the house, but with strange annotations. Symbols that didn't belong to blueprints. Some resembled letters, others geometric shapes. In the center, 3 triangles overlapped, forming what looked like an eye. He placed the letter beside it. Listen. That word lingered in his mind. He realized the piano in the corner had 3 intact keys left. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. As dusk fell, Elias lit a lantern and opened the piano's cover. The wood groaned. Duke lay near the hearth, watching. Elias pressed one of the remaining keys. It gave a dull, broken note. Another, silent. The third, when pressed, triggered a faint metallic click inside the frame. He leaned closer, listening. A panel near the back shifted slightly. Would you look at that? He pried it open with a screwdriver, revealing a small cavity containing a brass token engraved with the same 3 triangles as on the map. Beneath it, a strip of parchment with another line, to nourish what is dying. Elias frowned, murmuring to Duke, to nourish what's dying. What the hell does that mean? The dog's tail thumped softly, as though approving the puzzle. The next morning, as sunlight poured in through cracks, Elias drove into town for supplies. Paint scrapers, nails, and groceries. Millbrook was small, but lively. A blend of old wood facades and neon diner signs. People recognized him instantly. The quiet man with the scar and the shepherd. Some nodded politely. Others whispered. He stopped by Hendrick's Hardware, run by a stout man with a white beard and kind eyes named Gus Hendrick. Gus had run the store for 40 years and smelled faintly of sawdust and tobacco. Well, I'll be damned, Gus said, leaning on the counter. Didn't think anyone'd live in that hill house again. They say it's cursed. Elias smiled faintly. They say that about me too sometimes. Gus chuckled, counting out nails. If you need help with repairs, there's a young carpenter down by the wharf, Jamie Wells. She's good with impossible jobs. Elias raised an eyebrow. She? Best hands in 3 counties, Gus said, and half the town owes her a favor. When Elias returned that evening, Duke met him at the gate, tail wagging. Together they unloaded the supplies. He set up a small radio for company, though the static only made the house feel emptier. As he patched the walls, he kept thinking of the letter's words. Complete what I began. Later, as he sealed a crack with plaster, his trowel struck something hard, not wood, not metal, but glass. He scraped carefully until the shape revealed itself. A small, circular lens embedded into the wall, the size of a coin. Behind it, darkness. He peered closer. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw something move, a shadow behind the lens. He froze. Duke growled softly, hackles rising. Elias whispered, "Easy, boy." But his own pulse was hammering. He placed his palm on the wall again. It was warm, faintly vibrating, as if the house itself had a heartbeat. Night fell heavy. The storm rolled in from the coast, lightning flashing through the broken windows. Elias sat by the lantern, staring at the brass token. Duke rested his muzzle on Elias's knee, eyes half closed but alert. In the flicker of light, the token seemed to shimmer, its 3 triangles aligning perfectly with the shape of the house on the map. He reached for the map again, and this time noticed something he hadn't before. Along the bottom edge, hidden in faded ink, were the words barely visible. When the walls begin to speak, follow the sound. Just then, from behind the wall, where the lens had been, came a faint, rhythmic tapping. 3 slow knocks, steady as a heartbeat. Duke lifted his head, ears sharp, eyes locked on the wall. Elias whispered, "You hear that too, don't you?" The knock stopped. Then a whisper, soft, almost breathless. "Begin." The storm arrived like a reckoning. Rain lashed the windows. The wind howled through every crack, and the old house shuddered as if trying to remember how to stand. Elias Turner sat at the kitchen table with the brass token and the hand-drawn map spread before him, both now glistening under the flickering lantern light. Duke lay by the door, his body tense, ears twitching at every thunderclap. The whisper from the wall, "Begin," had not returned, but its echo lingered in Elias's mind like a heartbeat he couldn't ignore. He traced his finger along the inked lines of the map again, stopping where the overlapping triangles formed the symbol of an eye. Around it were faint notations, numbers perhaps, or dates. 1898, 1929, 3 keys. The years of construction, of collapse, of disappearance. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to Duke. "You wanted me to begin. Let's begin." Lightning illuminated the living room in white streaks. Duke lifted his head and gave a low growl, staring toward the narrow door beneath the stairs, the one Elias had ignored since arriving. The cellar. The storm outside roared, and yet the sound that reached them was deeper, duller, a rhythmic knocking from below. Elias hesitated, lantern in hand, his instincts as a rescuer awakening from long dormancy. The door to the cellar groaned as he pulled it open. The air that rose was damp and metallic, smelling of earth and rust. Steps descended into blackness. Duke moved first, tail low, body poised. Elias followed, the light trembling in his grasp. The stone walls were slick, water running down them like sweat. At the bottom, the cellar opened into a narrow chamber lined with forgotten tools, cracked jars, and the skeletal remains of shelves. And there, half buried under a pile of bricks, was a wooden trapdoor. Elias brushed it clear. The hinges were corroded, but when he pulled, it gave a reluctant sigh, releasing a gust of stale air. Beneath lay a tunnel, braced by rotted beams, vanishing into darkness. Duke sniffed the edge, whining softly. "Yeah," Elias said, "I smell trouble too." But he descended anyway. The tunnel stretched maybe 50 yards, twisting under the hill. Elias's lantern illuminated the walls. Rough stone, some areas carved with unfamiliar markings. He ran his fingers across them, feeling deliberate grooves. Symbols, letters. One resembled the triangles from the map, another, an hourglass shape. The deeper he went, the louder the storm's muffled growl above them became, as if nature itself warned him to turn back. But curiosity outweighed fear. They reached a small chamber at the end of the passage. Inside, on a raised stone platform, lay a metal trunk, its corners wrapped in tarnished brass. Dust cloaked it like ancient skin. Elias wiped the lid, revealing a name engraved faintly across it. Silas Turner. His breath caught. "No way!" He knelt, prying open the latches. Inside were 3 leather-bound journals, edges brittle with age. The first page bore handwriting neat and deliberate, written in ink that had browned over the decades. "If you are reading this, then blood has found blood again. I am Silas Turner, builder of these rails and keeper of their burden. When greed poisoned the iron roads, I hid what men would kill to possess. Only those who understand the value of restoration over ruin will find the rest." Elias sat back on his heels, the words striking something deep in him. Silas Turner, his great-grandfather, the one family never spoke of, who had vanished in 1929 after the stock market crash. Rumor had it he went mad or fled with stolen wealth. But this was something else. A man trying to protect, not plunder. He flipped through the pages. The entries grew darker, filled with sketches of gears, tunnels, coded diagrams. In one, Silas described 3 seals: nourish, learn, rest. The same triad from the map. Beneath it, a sequence of numbers. Elias copied them into his notebook. Lightning flashed again. Only this time, the light came not from above, but from behind him. He turned sharply, lantern trembling. For an instant, he swore he saw the outline of a man at the tunnel's mouth, a tall figure in an old-fashioned coat, holding a lamp of his own. Then darkness returned. Duke barked, teeth bared. The apparition was gone. They climbed back to the surface as rain pounded the roof. Elias's heart hammered, but his mind was alive. Upstairs, he spread the journals on the kitchen table, his hands shaking slightly. 3 seals, he murmured. Nourish, learn, rest. Duke sat beside him, watching. To nourish what's dying. Maybe the first clues in the kitchen. The doorbell startled him. In the middle of the storm, it sounded almost absurd. He opened the door to find Jamie Wells, drenched from the rain, her tool belt slung across her shoulder. She was in her early 30s, tall and wiry, with a shock of blonde hair tied into a careless bun and a small scar across her left eyebrow. Her eyes, gray as the weather, held the kind of calm earned from years of fixing what others had broken. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," she said, breathless. "Gus told me you might need help with that house. I live down the ridge. Figured I'd offer before the road floods." Elias blinked, surprised. "You picked one hell of a night to offer." Jamie grinned. Story of my life. She stepped inside, shaking rain from her jacket. Duke sniffed her boots, then, after a brief hesitation, gave a single approving wag of his tail. Elias gestured toward the journals on the table. You ever seen anything like these? Jamie wiped her hands on a rag and leaned over. These look old. Railroad schematics, maybe? My grandfather worked the northern lines. These symbols are maintenance codes. She traced a finger along the sketch. See this? It's a marker for a steam vault, some kind of underground chamber. Dangerous stuff back then. Her words made Elias's pulse quicken. You think there's more tunnels under here? Probably, she said. Old houses like this used to have escape routes or storage shafts. But I'd be careful. Collapses happen fast in weather like this. Before he could answer, Duke barked again, this time at the back door. All three turned. A faint silhouette moved near the tree line, visible through lightning flashes. A man with an umbrella, watching, then gone. Jamie frowned. You expecting someone? Elias shook his head. No. He extinguished the lantern and peeked through the glass. The rain made visibility near zero. Still, his gut told him the figure hadn't vanished. It had simply hidden. They waited until the thunder rolled away, but no one knocked again. Jamie exhaled, hands on hips. You've got more than plumbing issues here, Turner. Elias forced a smile. You're telling me. When she finally left near midnight, the rain had eased. Elias locked the doors, drew the curtains, and returned to the journals. One entry, near the end, caught his attention. If you follow the first seal, beware the ones who covet what they do not understand. They will come smiling. He didn't sleep. By dawn, he packed the journals and drove to Millbrook Library, a modest brick building that smelled of paper and rain. The librarian on duty was Clara Hensley, a small woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned neatly under a scarf. She had the patient smile of someone who'd spent decades surrounded by silence. Morning, Mr. Turner, she said softly, adjusting her glasses. Gus told me you were looking into local history. Elias laid the journals on the counter. I think I found a piece of it. Clara opened the first book gently, her eyes widening. My word, this handwriting, this is genuine 19th century script. You might have something extraordinary here. She led him to a reading room, pulling out reference ledgers and maps. For hours, they pored over documents, rail lines, property records, blueprints. Slowly, a picture formed. Silas Turner had been the chief engineer for the Heartline expansion, a railroad that vanished from records after 1929. The same year, Silas disappeared. Clara's brow furrowed. The company dissolved after accusations of embezzlement. Investors lost millions. If he hid anything, it would be to keep it from those men. As she spoke, a reflection caught Elias's eye in the window. Someone standing outside in the rain again, watching the library. He rose abruptly, heart pounding, and stepped outside. The street was nearly empty except for a black SUV parked down the block. A familiar figure leaned against it, Wyatt Cole, arms crossed, smirking as if he'd just confirmed a secret. Morning, Turner, he called, voice smooth as oil. Find anything interesting in those books? Elias's stomach tightened. You following me now, Cole? Wyatt shrugged. Small town. Hard not to run into folks. Just curious what kind of treasure keeps you up all night. Elias's voice hardened. There's no treasure, just history. History's worth money too, Wyatt said, tapping the SUV door. Careful where you dig. Some ghosts don't like being unearthed. He drove off, leaving a trail of muddy water and unease in his wake. Elias watched until the SUV vanished into the mist, then turned back toward the library, his reflection in the glass now fractured by raindrops, as if even the past refused to stay whole. Duke barked softly from the truck, his eyes fixed on the tunnel hill far away. The storm had passed, but inside Elias, something heavier had begun to stir, a truth clawing its way from the earth, demanding to be found. And somewhere deep beneath the old house, something answered with a faint metallic clang, like the turning of a key. The morning after Wyatt's quiet threat, Elias Turner woke to the weight of fog pressing against the windows. The air inside the old house felt thick with waiting, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Duke limped slightly from the long night before, restless yet alert, his eyes darting toward the cellar door again and again. Elias crouched beside him, rubbing the dog's ear gently. "You're not the only one who feels it," he said softly. "Something's changing down there." He spread Silas's journals across the table once more, tracing the cryptic sketches. The three seals, nourish, learn, rest, had been mentioned in multiple entries, always accompanied by the same symbol, three triangles interlocked. The journal's final note was underlined twice. When the triad aligns, the heart of the house will open. Elias's gaze drifted toward the cellar. The faint metallic clang from the night before echoed in memory, rhythmic, deliberate, like the house was signaling. He grabbed his lantern and tools. Duke followed, tail low, but determined. The air grew colder as they descended. The tunnel walls glistened, water tracing thin veins through stone. As Elias's lantern swung, it illuminated faint engravings previously unnoticed, small symbols chiseled into the rock. A loaf of bread, an open book, a wreath. The three seals. He touched the first one, the bread symbol, carved into a support beam. The moment his fingers brushed it, a panel of stone shifted inward, releasing a faint gust of air, scented with mildew and iron. Inside was a small niche containing a silver medallion engraved with the word "Nourish." Beneath it, Silas's handwriting etched into the wall. "Feed what remains. Life begins in the smallest flame." Elias pocketed the medallion. "That's one." They followed the second trail deeper into the tunnel. Duke's nose led the way, snuffling and occasionally stopping to paw at the dirt. Near the corner, where the water dripped steadily, Elias saw another symbol, the open book. He pressed it. The wall shuddered, and a hidden compartment slid open to reveal another medallion. This one bronze, etched with "Learn." The same phrase echoed in Silas's scrawl. Wisdom is the bridge between creation and peace. When Elias reached the final symbol, the wreath, it was carved into a section of the tunnel supported by rusted iron. As he pressed it, the ground trembled, dust cascading from above. A faint grinding noise followed, metallic and deep, as if gears hidden for decades had begun to turn. Duke barked, startled. Elias steadied himself, heart racing. The tunnel wall ahead split open, revealing an iron door patterned with concentric triangles. The door groaned as it opened, revealing a circular chamber bathed in amber light reflected from the lantern. Inside, the air was warmer, drier, sealed away from time itself. The floor was mosaic stone, forming the same interlocked triangles. At the center stood a table of marble, and upon it lay rows of gold bars, each engraved with Silas's emblem. Dust coated them like fine ash, but they gleamed nonetheless, a fortune sleeping beneath the earth. Elias approached slowly, awe mixed with disbelief. "You did it, old man," he murmured. "You really did hide it." Duke padded forward, sniffing the air, tail wagging hesitantly. Elias ran his fingers across one of the bars. Cold, heavy, real. Yet instead of triumph, a strange sadness welled in his chest. Silas hadn't hidden the gold for greed. He'd hidden it to keep men like Wyatt from destroying everything sacred. Footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Faint at first, then sharper, crunching through gravel. Duke's head shot up, growl rising from his throat. Elias spun around just as a flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "Well, well," came Wyatt Cole's voice, smooth and taunting. "Looks like I was right to follow you, Turner." Elias's stomach sank. Wyatt stood at the tunnel mouth, rain dripping from his slick jacket. Two men flanked him, both burly, both armed with crowbars. One was Reggie Moss, a thick-set man with a shaved head and a tattoo creeping up his neck. His left eye twitched whenever he grinned. The other, Tommy Vale, was leaner, mid-30s, with nervous eyes and a patchy beard, the kind of man who followed orders to avoid thinking. Wyatt stepped closer, the gold's reflection glinting in his pupils. "You've been busy, old soldier. Quite a retirement project you've got here." Elias's voice was cold. "This isn't yours, Cole. It was never meant for you." "Neither was it meant for you," Wyatt snapped. "You think you can sit on this? Half the town's dying, and you're hoarding gold like a gravekeeper." Elias tightened his grip on the lantern. "Silas hid this to protect it from men like you. You destroy everything you touch for profit." Wyatt's smile faltered, anger replacing charm. "I'm done asking nicely. Reggie, Tommy, take it." The two men moved forward. Duke lunged first, teeth sinking into Reggie's arm. The man roared, swinging wildly, but Duke refused to let go. Elias grabbed a rusted pipe from the ground, blocking Tommy's swing. The sound of metal on metal rang through the chamber like thunder. Wyatt shouted something, but his voice was drowned by chaos. Duke's growl, the clatter of boots, the echo of rage. Then came the gunshot, a sharp crack, deafening in the confined space. Duke yelped, stumbling back, blood seeping from his foreleg. Elias's heart stopped. "No!" He lunged, striking Tommy hard across the jaw. The man crumpled. Wyatt stumbled backward, realization flickering across his face. Not guilt, but panic. Elias dropped beside Duke, pressing a rag against the wound. "You're okay, boy. Stay with me." Duke whimpered, licking Elias's wrist, his tail thumping weakly. Reggie cursed, clutching his bitten arm. "Boss, he's bleeding. Out, let's go." Wyatt hesitated, torn between greed and fear. Lightning flashed through the tunnel entrance, illuminating his face. Twisted, desperate, haunted by the reflection of gold he couldn't yet touch. "Take what you can carry," he ordered finally. As they gathered the bars, Elias realized the tunnel wasn't stable. The door's mechanism had weakened the supports. Cracks spidered across the ceiling. He looked at Duke, then toward a side passage he'd noticed earlier, a narrow escape shaft half collapsed by debris. "Come on, boy. We're not dying here." He lifted Duke into his arms, staggering toward the shaft. The tunnel began to shake, dust choking the air. Behind him, Wyatt shouted, "Turner, you'll regret this!" Before a section of the ceiling gave way, cutting off the chamber entirely. The sound that followed was a deafening collapse, stone grinding, air imploding. Elias crawled through the narrow gap, splinters of rock slicing his palms. The tunnel led upward toward faint moonlight filtering through tree roots. When he finally emerged, gasping, the rain hit his face like absolution. He laid Duke gently on the wet grass. The dog's chest rose shallowly, eyes fluttering. Elias tore a strip from his shirt and wrapped it tighter around the wound. "Stay with me, Duke. Please." They were on the forest edge behind the house. The structure loomed below, its windows flickering with movement. Wyatt's men escaping, headlights slicing through the rain. Elias could hear sirens in the distance. Someone must have called the authorities. Duke tried to rise, but Elias pressed a hand to his shoulder. "No, rest now. You've done enough." The dog's breathing steadied slightly. His gaze locked on Elias's face. There was trust there, unbroken, even by pain. When dawn came, the house was sealed off by police tape. Reporters murmured near the gates. Townsfolk whispered from afar. Elias watched from the woods, his jacket soaked through, Duke resting against his side. Wyatt's SUV was gone. So was most of the gold. But something deeper had been uncovered. The reason Silas hid it, the curse that came with greed. Elias looked back at the ruined house, smoke curling from the collapsed tunnel. "You weren't just hiding treasure, were you?" he murmured. "You were hiding the truth." In the distance, thunder rolled again, softer now, but beneath it, or perhaps within Elias's mind, came the faintest echo, a whisper he couldn't mistake. "One seal remains." Rain returned to Millbrook like a ghost revisiting its own funeral. The police tape still fluttered weakly around the ruins of the Turner house, though most of the onlookers had moved on. To the townsfolk, the story was already turning into rumor, a tale of madness, treasure, and a broken veteran. But Elias Turner knew the story wasn't finished. It was merely buried. He sat in the small cabin behind Gus Hendrick's hardware store, a place the old man had lent him after the authorities sealed his property. The single lamp cast a tired glow on the wooden walls. Duke lay on a folded blanket near the stove, his foreleg wrapped in gauze. Despite the wound, his eyes followed every movement of Elias's hands. The dog had refused to die, just as he had refused to abandon his master in the tunnel. "Easy, boy," Elias murmured, cleaning the bandage. "You'll chase rabbits again soon." He smiled faintly, though his own eyes were shadowed and sunken. Gus had dropped by earlier, bringing soup and supplies. The old shopkeeper was as sturdy as the oak beams of his store. Thick arms, gray beard, a faint limp from an old logging injury. "I told the sheriff what I could," Gus had said, his voice heavy. "But without proof, it's your word against Cole's. Man's got lawyers thicker than his wallet." And now Elias sat alone, staring at the folded letter from Silas's journal he had salvaged from the ruins. The ink was faded, but one line still burned in his mind. "The one who seeks only to keep shall lose it all. The one who gives shall inherit the light." As he leaned forward to stoke the fire, something on Duke's collar caught the light, a fine layer of black dust. Elias frowned. He rubbed it between his fingers. Not soil, not ash. Coal. He froze. There hadn't been coal anywhere near the tunnel. Unless... The realization came like a spark through wire. The mine. Millbrook had once lived off the Heartline Coal Works, a mining network abandoned since the 1930s. the same company Silas Turner had built rails for. If the gold had been hidden beyond the house, the mine could have been its second vault. "Good boy," Elias whispered, scratching Duke's ear. "You just found our next trail." By midnight, the rain had thinned to drizzle. Elias parked the pickup at the forest edge, the mine entrance barely visible behind the thicket of firs. The sign still read, "Danger, collapsed shafts." He slung a flashlight over his shoulder and carried a small revolver, a relic from his service days. Duke limped beside him, refusing to stay behind. The mine mouth yawned like an open wound. Rusted rails led into the darkness, half buried in mud. Elias moved cautiously, sweeping his light over rotted timbers and forgotten tools. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and decay. Duke sniffed the ground, tail stiff. After several turns, faint voices drifted through the tunnel. Men's voices, low, echoing. Elias crouched behind a collapsed cart. The flashlight's beam flickered down the shaft, revealing movement. 3 figures hauling crates toward a truck parked by a side exit. Wyatt Cole was there, his once polished appearance now frayed by sweat and grime. His plaid shirt was torn, face streaked with soot. The smugness was gone, replaced by the sharp desperation of a man who knew he had crossed too far. He barked orders to his men. Reggie Moss, his bitten arm now wrapped in duct tape, and a new figure, Lyle Croft, a tall, rangy man with weathered skin, a hawk-like nose, and eyes the color of cold water. Lyle had been a miner once. His posture and soot-stained clothes made that clear. His movements were efficient, mechanical, but there was something hollow behind them, as if loyalty had been beaten out of him long ago. "Careful with that crate," Wyatt snapped. "We're almost done. Once this batch is on the truck, we vanish. The old man can explain to the cops how the gold walked itself out of the earth." Lyle didn't answer. He just lifted another crate, the muscles in his neck taut. Reggie muttered, "Boss, we should have left hours ago. That storm's flooding the south shafts." Wyatt turned, his face twisting. "We leave when I say we leave." Elias stepped from the shadows, flashlight aimed straight at Wyatt's face. "Then maybe you'll leave now." Wyatt froze, the light cutting across his features. His smirk returned, brittle but defiant. "Turner, I was wondering when you'd crawl back out of your hole." Duke growled beside him, one paw forward, ready despite the limp. Elias's voice was steady. "That gold doesn't belong to you." Wyatt laughed, dry and sharp. "Doesn't belong to anyone. Your ancestor buried it and died." "I'm just finishing the job he started." "No," Elias said quietly. "You're undoing it. Silas didn't hide it for greed. He hid it to protect people like you from themselves." Wyatt's jaw clenched. "Spare me the ghost stories. The world's built on greed, Turner. Always has been." Elias took a step closer. "You're wrong. My grandfather built those rails to connect towns, not to strip them. He believed what was created should serve others. That's what his note meant. The one who gives shall inherit the light." Reggie grunted, shifting uneasily. "Boss, maybe we should just—" "Shut up," Wyatt snapped, pulling his pistol. "You think you can stop me, Turner? You're one man with a crippled mutt." Elias didn't flinch. "Then shoot. But you'll never make it out with that gold. The tunnel's unstable. One wrong blast, and you'll bury yourself with it." Wyatt hesitated, glancing at the ceiling where water dripped steadily. "You're bluffing." Elias raised his flashlight toward a rusted fuse box near the wall, wires frayed and exposed. "Am I?" For a tense moment, the only sound was dripping water and Duke's low growl. Then Lyle spoke, his voice rough, reluctant, but firm. "He's not bluffing, Wyatt. These tunnels are dying. Another load, and it's all coming down." Wyatt turned on him. "You keep your mouth shut, Croft." But Lyle dropped the crate, the clang echoing like judgment. "I've seen enough men die for gold. Not again." He stepped back, hands raised. "I'm done." Rage flared in Wyatt's eyes. He swung the pistol toward Lyle, but before he could fire, Duke lunged. The gun went off, the shot ricocheting into the ceiling. Wood splintered. Elias tackled Wyatt, the two men crashing into the mud. The gun skittered away, disappearing into the darkness. The tunnel groaned above them. Cracks widened. "You fool!" Wyatt shouted, shoving Elias off. "We'll both die here." "Maybe that's justice," Elias gritted, grabbing Wyatt's collar. "For Silas, for this town." The ceiling gave a shuddering roar. Reggie and Lyle ran for the exit, shouting. Wyatt struggled, but Elias slammed him against the wall. A beam collapsed between them, separating the two men in a cloud of dust. "Turner!" Wyatt coughed, eyes wide. "Help me!" Elias stared at him through the smoke. For a moment, the years of pain and fury flickered like flame, then faded. He reached out his hand, but Wyatt's greed outweighed his reason. He lunged for the nearest crate instead. The weight unbalanced him. The ground gave way. He vanished into the black pit below, his scream swallowed by the collapsing mine. Elias stumbled backward, coughing, half blind. Duke barked, circling him. Together they ran, ducking falling beams, the tunnel shaking as if the mountain itself rejected the violence done to it. They burst into the open, just as the mine entrance caved in behind them. A rush of dust and wind pushing them into the wet grass. Rain began to fall again, gentle now. The forest was quiet, except for Elias's ragged breathing and Duke's soft whine. He looked back at the sealed entrance, mud sliding over it like nature's own tombstone. "It's over," he whispered, though part of him knew it wasn't. There was no joy in victory, only the echo of what greed had cost. When morning came, the authorities found the mine collapsed and the stolen gold buried once more. Lyle Croft surrendered himself, pale and trembling, saying little beyond. He brought it on himself. Reggie was never found. Elias sat on the hillside, Duke's head resting on his knee. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, warm and pure. He reached into his coat and drew out Silas's final medallion, the one he hadn't yet used. On it was a single word, etched faintly in Latin, Redimir, to redeem. He turned it over in his palm, watching the gold glint in the light. "You were right, old man," he said quietly. "It was never about the gold." The wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and pine, and for a heartbeat, just a breath, Elias could swear he heard a voice in it. "The house remembers." The rain stopped at dawn, leaving behind a sky bruised with orange and gray. Steam rose from the earth, where the collapsed mine had swallowed Wyatt Cole and his greed. And yet, despite the silence, Elias Turner could not shake the feeling that something unfinished still stirred beneath the mud. He sat outside Gus Hendrick's cabin, a thermos of coffee cooling in his hand, Duke lying beside him on a faded wool blanket. The old shepherd's bandaged leg trembled when thunder rolled in the distance, but he didn't whimper. He simply rested his chin on Elias's boot, amber eyes watching the horizon as if guarding it. Elias hadn't slept since the night of the collapse. The sheriff's men had investigated the site, but without clear evidence or bodies. Wyatt was presumed dead, the gold irretrievable. A quiet relief spread through the town, though gossip clung to Millbrook like smoke. People whispered that Elias had lost his mind chasing ghosts, or that the curse of the Turners had finally claimed its last heir. But Elias didn't care for the talk. He cared for one truth that wouldn't leave him alone. The house remembers. He unfolded Silas Turner's final letter again, the one he had found inside the medallion after the mine's collapse. The words were short, the ink nearly gone. Light burns brightest when fed by shadow. Guard it, even from yourself. Elias traced the faded signature. You knew this would happen, he murmured. A knock came at the door. Jamie Wells stood there, her blonde hair tied back, jeans stained with mud, eyes sharp but kind. You look worse than the mine, Turner, she said with a faint grin. Mind if I come in? Elias smiled tiredly. You always have good timing, Jamie. She entered, pulling off her gloves. I was fixing the roof at the old library when Sheriff Denton stopped by. He says the mine's catching fire underground. Methane pockets, old coal veins reigniting. They're afraid it'll spread to the forest if it breaks surface. Elias froze. That mine's sealed. It can't burn. Jamie shook her head. That's what they thought. But Denton said he saw movement before dawn. Someone dragging fuel drums near the south shaft. He thinks it's looters. Elias's chest tightened. He knew better. It's not looters. Then who? He looked at her grimly. Wyatt Cole. Jamie frowned. But they said he was dead. He's not. He's too stubborn for death. Elias grabbed his jacket. If he's trying to burn the mine, he's trying to erase evidence. I installed a motion camera down there before I confronted him. If it survived, it's proof. Everything. The gold, the fight, his confession. He must have realized it. Jamie put a hand on his arm. You can't go back in there alone. Elias glanced at Duke, who was already on his feet, tail low, ready. I won't be alone. The drive to the old Heartline mine took 15 minutes, though it felt longer under the weight of storm clouds thickening overhead. The air stank of smoke and gasoline. As they neared the entrance, Elias saw flickers of fire deep within the shaft, small tongues of flame dancing like ghosts. Wyatt's truck was parked crookedly near the ridge, door open, radio still murmuring static. They stepped out. Stay with the truck, Elias told Jamie. If anything happens, drive. Like hell I will, she shot back, grabbing a flashlight. Inside, the heat was unbearable. The tunnel walls glowed faintly red, veins of ember pulsing through old coal seams. Duke led the way, weaving between falling debris, his paws splashing through puddles of boiling water. Elias coughed, pulling a wet cloth over his mouth. The deeper they went, the thicker the smoke became, until a figure emerged from the haze, backlit by the flames. Wyatt Cole. He was barely recognizable, soot-smeared, wild-eyed, shirt torn open to reveal blistered skin. His hair, once neatly slicked, now hung in greasy strands. In one hand, he held a canister of fuel. In the other, a lighter. You just don't quit, do you, Turner? His voice was hoarse, half mad. You think you can play hero after stealing what's mine? Elias stepped forward slowly. That gold was never yours. You buried yourself chasing it. Don't bury the whole town, too. Wyatt laughed, a sound cracked and hollow. The town laughed at me. They called me a parasite, a failed developer. But they'll remember me now. I'll turn your precious heritage into dust." He flipped the lighter open, flame flickering inches from the ground, soaked in gasoline. Duke growled, teeth bared. "Wyatt," Elias said, voice firm, almost pleading, "look around you. You've already lost everything. Don't make this your grave." But the other man's hand trembled, not from hesitation, but rage. "You took my legacy, Turner. You and your ghost stories." Before he could act, a burst of air blew through the shaft as part of the tunnel collapsed behind them. The flames flared, swallowing Wyatt's silhouette. He screamed as his sleeve caught fire, stumbling backward. Elias didn't think. He charged forward, tackling him into the mud, smothering the flames with his coat. Wyatt struggled, spitting curses, but Elias pinned him down. "You're not dying here," he growled. "Why save me?" Wyatt gasped. "Because someone has to end this right." A thunderous crack ripped through the tunnel as the fire reached the old storage tanks. Gasoline ignited in a wave of light and sound. The blast threw both men backward. Elias hit the ground hard, stars exploding behind his eyes. Smoke poured in thick, choking clouds. He heard Duke barking, frantically digging through the debris toward him. A massive wooden beam had fallen, blocking their exit. Flames climbed the walls like red serpents. Elias coughed, dragging Wyatt's unconscious body beside him. He could barely see the way out. "Duke!" he shouted. "Find it!" The dog barked once, loud and sharp, then disappeared into the smoke. Seconds stretched into eternity. The air grew thin, each breath a blade. Then a sound, metal scraping against rock. Duke emerged from the haze, jaws clamped around a length of chain attached to an old pulley system embedded in the ceiling. He pulled once, twice, muscles trembling. The mechanism groaned, and suddenly a gust of wind roared through the shaft as if the mine itself exhaled. The backdraft sucked the smoke upward through the ventilation flues, clearing the path just enough for light to pierce the darkness. "Good boy," Elias coughed, lifting Wyatt onto his shoulder. "Now move." They staggered toward the faint glow of daylight. Behind them, the fire surged again, devouring the lower tunnels. Just as Elias reached the mouth of the mine, another beam collapsed. He dove forward, rolling into the open as the entrance imploded behind him in a roar of flame. Jamie rushed forward from the truck, eyes wide with horror. "Elias!" She helped drag Wyatt away from the blaze, coughing violently. The once mighty developer lay limp, burned, but alive. His hand twitched, reaching weakly toward Elias. "You could have let me die." Elias stared at him, eyes weary, but calm. "That's not who I am." Sirens wailed in the distance, fire engines and police vehicles cresting the hill. Jamie waved them down, her hands trembling. Duke lay beside Elias, sides heaving, fur singed at the edges. But his eyes, those steady, amber eyes, never left his master. Elias reached for him, pulling the dog close. When the firefighters doused the last flames, the sheriff approached. Sheriff Denton was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, his face weathered like the land itself, with a graying mustache and eyes too tired to still believe in miracles. "Turner," he said quietly, "you've got some explaining to do." Elias nodded, voice hoarse. "You'll have it. There's a camera down there. It caught everything." An officer returned minutes later. carrying a half-melted device wrapped in cloth. Elias smiled faintly. Guess luck hasn't left us yet. Hours later, Wyatt Cole was handcuffed to a stretcher, his face pale, his fury gone. As paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, he looked back at Elias one last time, eyes glimmering with something that might have been regret or simply exhaustion. Elias knelt beside Duke, brushing soot from the dog's fur. "You saved me again, partner," he whispered. Duke wagged his tail weakly, head resting against Elias's chest. The wind blew through the burned trees, carrying the smell of ash and rain. For the first time in years, Elias felt the war inside him quiet. He looked toward the horizon, where the rising sun bled into the smoke, like light returning to a wounded world. "It's over," he murmured. "We made it home." And as the sirens faded, the forest echoed only with the steady rhythm of Duke's breathing and the faint crackle of fire surrendering to rain. A full year had passed since the fire that almost swallowed Millbrook's hills. The seasons had turned like pages in a patient book, and the town, once hushed with suspicion and fear, now pulsed with quiet hope. Morning sunlight washed over the Turner estate on the ridge. No longer a charred skeleton, but a living, breathing monument reborn from ash. The once broken windows gleamed anew. The gardens flourished with rows of marigolds, and above the newly built gate hung a bronze sign, Elias Turner Canine Rescue and Training Center. Children's laughter drifted through the yard. A group of them, wearing bright red vests 2 sizes too big, ran in uneven circles as half a dozen dogs barked joyfully around them. The largest of them, Duke, now graying at the muzzle, but proud as ever, walked among them with the slow dignity of an old commander inspecting his troops. His left hind leg carried a faint scar, but he moved without limp, his head held high. "Eyes forward, tails straight," Elias Turner called from the porch, his voice carrying both warmth and gentle authority. Time had carved deeper lines around his eyes, yet his bearing was lighter, unburdened. He wore a denim shirt rolled to the elbows, a whistle hanging from his neck, and boots scuffed from months of work and dirt. He watched Duke guide the pups with soft pride. "That's right, Professor," he said with a chuckle. "Teach them how it's done." The nickname, Professor Forepaws, had started as a joke from the kids. Now it was official, engraved on Duke's brass tag and stitched into his tiny instructor's vest. The porch creaked, and Jamie Wells stepped out carrying a tray of lemonade. Her blonde hair had grown longer, tied in a loose braid. She wore a flannel shirt rolled to the sleeves, her hands roughened by work, but steady as always. "You've got a full house again," she said, smiling. "If this keeps up, we'll need more kennels." Elias took the tray from her. "A good problem to have." Jamie leaned against the railing, her eyes scanning the training field. "The sheriff called this morning. Wyatt's sentencing went through. 15 years. He pled guilty. Said he wanted to make peace with the ghosts." Elias's expression softened. Maybe he finally understood what Silas meant about redemption. Jamie nodded. Maybe. Strange thing, forgiveness. Doesn't erase the fire, but it stops it from spreading. They watched the children practice rescue drills, each one paired with a dog. Some pups dug through sand pits to find mock victims. Others fetched ropes or barked in signal. The program had started small, just Elias, Duke, and a handful of volunteers. But word spread fast. First, the Veterans Association sent funds. Then the local paper wrote about it. Soon, families from other towns came to learn, to heal, and to laugh again. One of the children, a freckled girl named Lila May, waved excitedly. "Mr. Turner, Professor Duke, found my whistle again." She was 9, with fiery red curls and a gap-toothed grin, wearing mismatched boots and the kind of endless enthusiasm that could brighten any storm. Elias grinned. "Well, Professor Duke never misses a mission." Lila ran over, crouching beside Duke. "He's the best teacher ever," she declared, hugging the dog's neck. Duke wagged gently, resting his chin on her shoulder, eyes half closed in contentment. Watching them, Elias felt something stir deep in his chest. Not sorrow, not even pride, but a kind of peace he hadn't known since before the war, before loss had hardened him. He thought of Silas and the legacy he had misunderstood for so long. The gold had never been the treasure. This, laughter, purpose, renewal, was. Later that afternoon, Elias gathered the group by the oak tree overlooking the valley. The hill had once been barren after the fire, but now the grass shimmered with new green, dotted with small flags where saplings had been planted. "All right, everyone," he said, gesturing toward the horizon. "Who remembers what our motto is?" The children shouted together, their voices clear and eager. "Give to keep." Elias smiled. That's right. Silas Turner believed that anything worth keeping must first be shared. Knowledge, courage, love. It all grows when we give it away. That's what makes rescuers special. You don't just save others. You save the part of yourself that still believes in good. He looked down at Duke, who sat beside him, tail thumping. "And if you ever forget, this old fellow will remind you." That drew a chorus of laughter. Even Sheriff Denton, who stood at the edge of the crowd, allowed himself a small smile. The sheriff had grown close to Elias over the year, often bringing his own retired canine, a German shepherd named Scout, to visit the center. His weathered face still carried the weight of authority, but his tone with Elias had softened from suspicion to friendship. "You did good, Turner," he said quietly after the speech. "Town needed this." Elias shrugged modestly. "The house did most of the work." Denton chuckled. "House, dog, ghosts, whatever it was, it worked." As dusk fell, the lanterns along the path flickered to life. Jamie played soft guitar by the fire pit while the children roasted marshmallows. Duke lay beside Elias, eyes half closed, paws twitching in dream. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. "Looks like Millbrook's alive again," Jamie said. Elias nodded slowly. Alive and listening. Listening, he smiled faintly. To the past. To what it's trying to tell us. She leaned against him lightly, the sound of laughter weaving through the evening air. "And what's it saying?" He looked out toward the old house, its windows glowing with warm light against the fog rising from the valley. "It says every soul, lost to greed or grief, can still find a way home. You just have to leave the light on." A soft bark broke the moment. Duke stirring, stretching, his eyes glimmering with reflection of the fire. Elias reached down, patting his head. "Don't worry, Professor. Your class isn't over yet." The dog wagged his tail as if agreeing. Around them, fireflies began to rise, small sparks floating into the deepening night like blessings taking flight. The house on the hill shimmered against the stars, no longer a ruin of ghosts, but a beacon of second chances. By the end of the week, a brass plaque would be mounted at the gate. engraved with Silas Turner's words, "The one who gives shall inherit the light." And every evening thereafter, when the lamps flickered on and the laughter echoed through the valley, Elias would stand on that porch with Duke at his side, watching the golden glow ripple across the grass like dawn reborn. He had kept his promise to his ancestor, to the town, and to himself. The Turner legacy was no longer buried in darkness. It was alive, breathing, and teaching others to find their way out of the shadows. And as the stars came out, Elias whispered softly, not to anyone in particular, but to the wind that carried every memory ever left behind. "Rest easy, Silas. The house remembers, and now it shines." There are moments in life when we walk through fire, when everything we've built turns to ash, and all we can do is keep breathing. But sometimes, in those ashes, God plants a spark. It's quiet, gentle, but unyielding, the kind of light that leads us home when we can't see the path. Elias Turner found his miracle not in gold nor in glory, but in grace. The grace to forgive, the grace to begin again. And that grace, whether you call it redemption, faith, or simply love, is the hand of God working quietly through us. Because every act of kindness is a small miracle. Every time you lift someone who's fallen, every time you choose compassion over anger, every time you give instead of keeping, you become part of that divine light. The same light that turned a ruined house into a home, a scarred veteran into a teacher, and a broken past into a living hope. So tonight, wherever you are, take a moment to look around. The small blessings, the laughter, the loyal hearts beside you. That's where God hides his miracles. May the Lord bless you and keep your heart brave, your faith strong, and your spirit kind. If this story touched you, if you believe in second chances, in the goodness that still exists in this world, share this video, leave a comment with a prayer or thought of hope, subscribe to join this family of light, and may God's grace walk beside you always.